Okay. Somebody give me a short overview of Numbers, what it is, why it's in the Bible. If I were a man on the street and I stopped you and we were having a biblical conversation and I said, yeah, that's good and all. I like the New Testament, but I don't understand why God put all this other stuff in the Bible. Like, what in the world is Leviticus and Numbers for? Would you smile and go, yeah, I don't know either. We had to learn that in OT1. Or how would you actually define it to somebody off the street?
I tell them it's the account of the wilderness wandering. It's the period after God gave the law, before they actually got to the promised land.
Okay, great. The account of wanderings. What else would you add to that? Somebody, yeah.
I would tell him, it's just like the government. He needed an account. He needed to see what he had in people. So he numbered them up and checked them out so he can get them prepared for something that's coming up, which would
be
what's going to take place.
What's he getting them ready for?
Conquest of Canaan.
Take over the promised land. Why do you feel like it's in the Bible?
It's God's setup. It's showing us exactly how little the Israelites had on their own and just how much God had to do with the conquest. He's giving them all the instructions of, just letting them know that it's going to be Him that gets them through it.
Yes.
It's to show how God had directed Israel from Sinai to the plains of Moab, and there's a special emphasis on certain things that He does in the book of Numbers.
Okay, absolutely. One of the key words that I haven't heard yet that I hope you guys would mention at some point is the word disobedience. This book highlights disobedience of a chosen people. We're going to talk about that today. We'll get to the part where basically they go from 11-day journey to God saying that's it and stretching it out to 40 days or 40 years. But realize this is a great book to turn to when you're trying to teach people about the importance of trusting God, of believing in God, and having faith in what He says. Because had they done that, you can imagine by the 15th, 16th day, they would have enjoyed the promised land. They and their children. As it was, an entire generation was wiped out. We left off in Numbers chapter 3, talking about the sons of Aaron. Specifically, we left off in verse 10. I want you to drop down to verse 14. In your Bible, you may have a subheading that says, Census of Levites Commanded. You guys remember the square picture that I showed you? And remember how we talked about there being non-Israelites on the outside, Israelites on the inside, and then priests in the middle. And each individual square, we were trying to get more and more clean, more and more holy, more and more righteous. Where would you put the Levites in that whole system?
They were the cleanest. They could go farthest in the center than everybody else.
You're close. Were the Levites as a general people cleaner than the priests? Or was the priest a section of the Levites?
A section of the Levites.
Right. So if you're looking at it from a square perspective, in fact, give me 2 seconds. I'm going to grab it off my wall. Okay. There we go. Let's see if I can tilt this so you guys can see. Okay. Everybody see that?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If I were adding them to this, added a red. Let me see if I can tilt it. There we go. You guys see the red square?
Mm-hmm. Hey, Brad, you might want to use page 417 in the Pentateuch book as well. It looks like it's got something. It's pretty good there.
417. Oh, yeah. Not as good as mine, but that's pretty good.
No, that's right. That's right.
Take a look. If you look on here, you see the non-Israelites are outside. They are unclean. Then we go to the Israelite people. They are in the camp. They're clean. The red would then be the Levites. We got to get them cleaner because why? What are they doing? What are the Levites going to be doing?
Take down and set up the tabernacle.
They are responsible for the tabernacle. Now, there's also this group of priests that have got to go into the place like the Holy of Holies, but we're looking at a group of people that are responsible for this lampstand, that are responsible for the curtains, where they are responsible for all of this, and so God wants to make sure this group of people is even further inside this square than just the regular group. So we start in verse 14. The Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai, saying, "Number the children of Levi by their fathers' houses, by their families. You shall number every male from a month old and above." Now what's the difference there? Already we got a difference in the whole numbering scheme.
They're numbering the people from a month old and above.
Bingo. What were we doing before that?
Fighting age, 20 years.
20 years, fighting age. So God has already set them apart distinctly. Look at verse 17. These were the sons of Levi by their names: Gershon, Kohath, Merari. You need to put an asterisk or underline or star that, because what we're going to do over the next few chapters is we're going to look kind of like the chart on page 417. Thank you very much, Jared. We're going to look at those particular individuals and what their rules were. What were they responsible for? And if you don't understand in your mind when you read the name, for instance, Gershon, who that was, none of this is going to make any sense to you. As you're reading through the book of Numbers, if you haven't kind of figured out the genealogy of this Levite race, who they are, who the sons are, then everything we're fixing to do is going to basically just be a bunch of trivia to you. Okay, so we start seeing God spread these people out. If you've got your Pentateuch book, go ahead and have it open as well to the chart that Mr. Kyle so aptly mentioned, page 417. Because this is going to give us where these people were physically to be. You'll notice, not only does it mention the Levites being around the tabernacle itself, and ironically, if you look on that chart, it gives you the numbers. So just imagine for just a moment, having a tabernacle, and to the north of that tabernacle, you've got 6,200 people. How much physical space do you think you need for 6,200 people to live? Give me an example. All right. Or just remain quiet. Do what?
A small town has 6,000 people.
Okay. How many of you have been to summer camp? How many people were in camp?
200?
A couple of hundred at most. Now you think about how big a summer camp area is, and then you multiply that big enough to accommodate 6,200 people. So these are large areas. I'm trying to get you to kind of visualize mentally how much space these people would need. Not only do you have to have space for the people, once you get out to the other families, once you get, for instance, to Dan, you got 62,700. You got to have the people, and what else do you have to have?
Food, water,
Land.
You got to have the animals. What are the animals for?
Sacrifices.
Sacrificing. For food. You set up a system now in which the people are eating, they're sacrificing, you got to feed each other. So this was a massive encampment. All right, verse 23, just to kind of give you an idea of how it fits in with this picture. Verse 23 of chapter 3, the families of the Gershonites were to camp behind the tabernacle westward. So if on page 417, if you use north as being straight up, east as being to the right, obviously Gershom we should find to the west on the right or the left, and that's exactly where it is. Notice verse 25. And this is why it starts getting important to understand who these people were. He starts giving each individual family responsibilities. The duties of the children of Gershon in the tabernacle of meeting included the tabernacle, the tent with its covering, the screen for the door of the tabernacle of the meeting, the screen for the door of the court, the hangings of the court which are around the tabernacle, the altar, their cords, according to all the work relating to them. So you've got 7,500 people, but remember that also includes young children, that are responsible to do all of the work we just talked about. Every time the tabernacle moves, they gotta jump up and do it. Now look at verse 31. We're talking about Kohath. 31 says their duty included the ark, the table, the lampstand, the altars, the utensils, the sanctuary with which they ministered, the screen, and all the work relating to them. You go down to verse 36. The children of Merari included the boards of the tabernacle, its bars, its pillars, its sockets, utensils, all of the work relating to it, the pillars of the court all around, all of their sockets, the pegs, and their cords. So God has specifically laid out what He expects from each one of these families. Somebody tell me what you think is going to happen. Well, let's bring it down to modern day times. What sometimes happens in church families and congregations when there are divisions of labor? Yes, sir.
Well, I was just going to say that we end up doing each other's jobs. The elders will do the deacons' jobs, and the deacons will do sometimes the elders' jobs, and it gets a little mixed up sometimes.
Preachers do everybody's job.
Tends to be a little bit of jealousy between the groups and tension over the different roles, and we see that often in women's roles with men.
Okay.
We see it between those who are able to, preach and those who maybe are just, they take a job like cleaning the building or something like that, and they are not necessarily given credit, or people don't see their works.
Okay. Guys, think with me for just a moment, in all seriousness. If you're a Levite, do you think all of the outer clans around you are going to look on you differently? You're closer to the tabernacle. You got a special job. You don't have to tend to the animals and so forth like they would. But take that one step further. So let's say for the first 2 weeks you feel special. You got a job, and your job is hanging a rod. That's your job. Now, the first 2 weeks, first 2 months, you might think that's great, that's wonderful. After about 3 years of hanging the same rod over and over, and how are you going to feel? Are you going to be ready to be done with that rod? Are you going to look over at your neighbor who gets to touch the altar? Or maybe you get to see somebody messing with a lampstand. Or maybe you see somebody who is hanging a curtain. You say, man, I'd like to do that. You think there's going to be any of that starting to build up among these people? Absolutely. And eventually that's kind of what we see play out among some of the family members. How many of you in there have heard of the 80-20 rule in the church? What is the 80-20 rule?
That's when 20% of the people do 80% of the work.
Right. Is it real?
Yes.
It is real.
Probably not even that generous either.
Chris is thinking more like 1090, something like that. As we are looking at what is going on, as God is setting up this plan, I want you to keep all of these things in mind. Realize that these were very human people, and they were subject to human jealousy, to laziness, to envy, to strife. And you can just imagine, instead of it being a few days like it was supposed to be, all of a sudden it gets stretched over years. You can imagine that sets up a major condition to be spoiled, and that's what we find. Somebody read to me verses in chapter 3, verses 40 through 45.
Then the Lord said to Moses, "Number every firstborn male of the sons of Israel from a month old and upward, and make a list of their names. You shall take the Levites for me, I am the Lord, instead of all the firstborn among the sons of Israel, and the cattle of the Levites, instead of all the firstborn among the cattle of the sons of Israel." So Moses numbered all the firstborn among the sons of Israel, just as the Lord had commanded him. And all the firstborn males, by the number of names from a month old and upward, for their numbered men were 22,273. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Take the Levites instead of all the firstborn among the sons of Israel, and the cattle of the Levites, and the Levites shall be mine. I am the Lord."
Okay, what's going on right here?
Census.
It's more of a dedication, and it's a switch of a dedication. You've got God who originally says, look, I recognize the firstborn is important, and that's what I used to require, but look at what he says in verse 41. You shall take the Levites for me, I am the Lord, instead of all the firstborn among the children of Israel, and the livestock of the Levites, instead of all the firstborn among the livestock of the children of Israel. Who is now going to be his select?
The Levites.
The Levites. So he is looking out at this group of people, the Israelites, who have always dedicated their firstborn to him, and he is now saying, okay, we can stop that practice, because from this point on, these people are mine. They're going to be dedicated to me instead of the firstborn. All right, chapter 4, we start looking at the duties for the sons of Kohath. Specifically, what were they required to do? It goes into great painstaking detail. Notice verse 5, when the camp prepares to journey, Aaron and his sons shall come, they shall take down the covering, the veil, the cover of the ark, the testimony with it. And they shall put on it a covering of badger skins, and spread over that a cloth entirely of blue. And they shall insert its poles, and on the table of showbread they shall spread a blue cloth. But he is giving them exceptional description of how to move this thing. Now, if you think he just backed up a U-Haul and they said, all right, load everything in, we'll set it up. They had to have the right kind of skins, the right color cloth. They had to do it in the proper steps, the proper order. Now again, we talked about this a lot in this class. Did God need any of this? No. Why was he doing it then? Is he a mean God? Is he just wanting to prove how big he is? Why would God do this?
Obedience.
Obedience. He's wanting these people out of the free will of their heart to do this. Okay, look with me, for instance, at verse 25 of that chapter. They shall carry the curtains of the tabernacle, and the tabernacle of meeting with its coverings, the covering of badger skins that is on it, the screen for the door of the tabernacle of meeting, the screen of the door of the gate of the court, the hangings of the court which are around the tabernacle and altar, and their cords, all their furnishing for the service, and all that is made of these things, so shall they serve. one of the things that if you don't get this out of your time at Bear Valley, then we have all failed miserably as your teachers, is the idea of servanthood. If you feel like what you're doing is putting you on a pedestal and is maybe getting your pocket rich, etc., then none of the preachers has really, none of your instructors has done a great job, because what you need to come across with is what he is saying here, and that is this idea to serve, servanthood. Because ultimately we are to be lowly servants for him. He then goes into each one of these family members. Here's what your duties are specifically. Starting in verse 34, he continues with this census of the Levites. Moses and Aaron, the leaders of the congregation, numbered the sons of the Kohathites by their families and by their father's house, 30 years old and above, even 50 years old, everyone who entered the service for work in the tabernacle of meeting. We then go into chapter 5, where they are specifically trying to look at getting into that inner box again. Ceremonial unclean persons were isolated. It talks about confession, restitution. It gives a law concerning unfaithful wives. Again, all of this is serving to make it stand out how these people are supposed to stand out for God, how they are supposed to be holy, clean, and to be able to be his servants. For instance, command the children of Israel, chapter 5, verse 2, that they put out of the camp every leper, everyone who has discharge, whoever becomes a defiled by a corpse. You shall put out both male and female. You shall put them outside the camp, that they may not defile their camps in the midst of which I dwell. The children of Israel did so, and they put outside the camp as the Lord spoke to Moses, so the children of Israel did. Now, understand as you look at those passages, do you think the people there wanted to be outside the camp?
No.
Now, what would you get by being in the camp? What were some of the benefits?
Association with people.
Okay, you've got people. You got fellowship. What else?
Protection.
Protection, that's huge. This is a time, if you wandered a little bit too far to the left or right, you were in somebody else's land. You know, they didn't go to the UN Council to see if they could find a resolution. They just went ahead and took you on out. What else?
Closer to God.
How about a spiritual connection? Folks, you get outside the camp and suddenly you are cut off from Jehovah. So there was an enormous amount of emotional, spiritual, and physical pressure for these people to remain faithful, clean, and honest. They didn't want to be put outside the camp. Look with me starting in, well, let's go back to verse 11. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, if any man's wife goes astray and behaves unfaithfully toward him, and a man lies with her carnally, and it's hidden from the eyes of her husband, and it is concealed that she has defiled herself, and there was no witness against her, nor was she caught, if the spirit of jealousy comes upon him, and he becomes jealous of his wife who has defiled herself, or if the spirit of jealousy comes upon him, and he becomes jealous of his wife, although she has not defiled herself, then the man shall bring his wife to the priest. He shall bring the offering required of her, 1/10 of an ephah of barley meal. He shall pour no oil on it, put no frankincense on it, because it is a grain offering of jealousy, an offering for remembering, for bringing iniquity to remembrance. The priest shall bring her near, shall set her before the Lord. The priest shall take the holy water, the earthen vessel, take some of the dust that is in the floor of the tabernacle, put it into the water. And the priest shall stand, the woman before the Lord, uncover the woman's head, put the offering for remembering in her hands, which is the grain offering of jealousy. The priest shall have in his hand the bitter water that brings a curse. Somebody just go ahead and tell me what's going to happen. What was their rule of thumb?
Adulteresses were to be killed.
Okay? She's going to do what with the water? You're going to drink it. And it's going to be a test. Look on down to verse 21. Then the priest shall put the woman under the oath of the curse. And he shall say to the woman, the Lord make you a curse, and an oath among your people. When the Lord makes your thigh rot and your belly swell, and may this water that causes the curse go into your stomach and make your belly swell and your thigh rot, and then the woman shall say, Amen, so be it. The priest shall write these curses in the book, and he shall scrape them off into the bitter water. He shall make the woman drink the bitter water that brings a curse, and the water that brings the curse shall enter her to become bitter. Then the priest shall take the grain offering of jealousy from the woman's hand, shall wave the offering before the Lord, and the priest shall take a handful of the offering as it's a memorial portion, burn it on the altar, afterward make the woman drink the water. When he has made her drink the water, then it shall be, if she has defiled herself, behaved unfaithfully toward her husband, that the water that brings a curse will enter her, become bitter, her belly will swell, her thigh will rot, and the woman will become a curse among her people. But if the woman has not defiled herself and is clean, she'll be free and may conceive children. All right, somebody help me explain this or understand this. What's going on, and how do we today in modern times, how do we defend this?
How do we defend it?
Do what?
I was asking, how do we defend it?
Yeah. If I'm, let's say that I'm Richard Dawkins, I look you in the eye and I say, this is ridiculous. Why in the world would somebody want to do this? Furthermore, there is nothing today that would cause somebody's leg to rot or belly to swell. How can you, sitting there in Denver, Colorado, tell me this was real?
Well, STDs.
Okay.
Could cause someone to rot.
Okay. I would point out, by the way, that usually doesn't affect the stomach, and it's not as quick acting, and it definitely doesn't do anything with water, but I will grant you that STDs were possible. What else? Yeah.
The power of God. They did that in the temple. They wrote out the curses into the water. God was judging the woman.
Okay. Do you remember we had a conversation a couple of days ago about miracles and about the fact that Christians oftentimes are scared to defend miracles? This would be one of those instances where you need to realize, guys, this may have been a flat-out 100% miraculous event. Beyond the shadow of a doubt. Now, I say that with one hint of caution, in that if it just stopped with the belly, as an anatomist, I can explain it. When you get to the rotting thigh, it gets a little bit harder for me to explain as a naturalistic event. How could I explain it with the belly part?
You just drink dust and paper.
Okay? But that's not necessarily going to have any differentiation between a guilty woman and a not guilty woman.
I guess it's a possibility that she was pregnant. That has something.
Let's say, I'm trying to look for somebody. Lyle, are you married?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Let's say we take Lyle's wife up into the main auditorium upstairs. And we put her before the elders and before Neil Pollard, and we say, okay, we're not sure, but we think maybe something happened. We want you to drink this water. If nothing happens, you're good to go, you're free, you're clean, everything's great. But if your belly swells and your thigh rots, you're guilty. Now, if you are Lyle's wife, what's going to be going through your mind right then? Yes.
Couldn't something be psychosomatic?
Yes.
Pseudo.
If Lyle's wife really was guilty, when they pronounce that to her, what is immediately going to happen physiologically throughout her body?
She's going to feel sick.
She's going to be dumping everything, all kinds of neurotransmitters, every kind of chemical you can imagine is going to be pouring into her system because of stress, high blood pressure. If she's guilty, she knows she's guilty. And there ain't nothing in the world, even though outside she may be just a plain look, never ever show it, you cannot change the inside. And so you've got things going on inside of you that are literally working you up, working you up, working you up. You're thinking, oh, I'm fixing to be found out. So is it possible that somebody who truly is guilty is going to express something that an innocent person would not? Yeah, I can get that. I could actually get that somebody who is stressed, they have a weakened immune system. They're not going to be as able to fight off if there are any germs in that particular bitter water. I'm cool with that. But I can't explain the thyroid to you. And that's, I think, would actually have to, yeah. Keely.
I've read through this before, maybe I just missed it. Was the water, did it taste bitter, like, to an innocent person? Like if a girl was innocent, did it still, like, cause her stomach to be bitter? Or?
I'm not sure I'm following you.
I didn't know if it tasted bitter just to the guilty woman that was being tested.
I think if you really check out the full text, it is considered a bitter water or a bitter water curse throughout the text.
Okay, that's...
For instance, go all the way back to verse 18. Priest shall stand the woman before the Lord, uncover the woman's head, put the offering for remembrance in her hands, which is the grain offering of jealousy. The priest shall have in his hand the bitter water that brings a curse.
Okay.
So it kind of defines it as a bitter water before she's ever put it to her lips. So on the thyroid, me as a Christian, if I'm arguing, debating with a skeptic, there may be a point at which I can say, you know what, some of that makes sense. I can understand why somebody might swell a little bit. They might kind of freak out. They're having panic attack, etc. But the thyroid, I might have to look somebody in the eye and say, you know what, that was the handiwork of God. And he was showing them the importance of being obedient and the fact that he could accurately judge people. Because he can judge us, can he not? Accurately. He knows everything that everybody in that room and this room has done. So here we've got a kind of a glance at what it's going to be like on judgment. There's not going to be any hiding. If nobody ever saw this person, you know, between her and her husband, she's scot-free, because what was the rule for adultery back then? What had to happen for adultery?
She was killed.
If somebody was committing adultery, you brought both parties, correct?
Mm-hmm.
How many witnesses did you have to have, JT?
2 or 3.
2 or more. So in the eyes of 2 or more witnesses, and both the man and the woman were condemned. So let me throw this out in the New Testament context. How many of you have heard of a adulterous woman being thrown before Jesus Christ? Everybody, right? What did Jesus do?
Forgave it.
Okay.
But wasn't everybody judged in a sense there where everybody had sin?
Okay. I would throw out one other thing, though.
The man was.
And it's not that I'm not disagreeing with you, but this is a point that I think everybody overlooks. Jesus was perfect. He did not violate the law in any fashion. Therefore, he didn't violate the law with her. This was not an exception clause. He didn't look at it and say, you know what, on this occasion, I'm going to let you slide. I think part of the answer is Jesus had to let her slide because who was not brought before him?
The man.
The man. He wasn't there. Now, had that man been brought before him too, Jesus may have been pinned down to have to make that decision of what he was going to do ultimately. But because of the way the law was written, you had to bring both of them in front of the people with two or more witnesses. Does that make sense?
That's what you wrote in the ground.
All right, let's get back to Numbers. Chapter 6. Somebody start reading verse 1. Give me through about verse 5.
Again the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the sons of Israel, and say to them, When a man or woman makes a special vow, the vow of the Nazarite, to dedicate himself to the Lord, he shall abstain from wine and strong drink. He shall drink no vinegar, whether made from wine or strong drink, nor shall he drink any grape juice, nor eat fresh or dried grapes. All the days of his separation he shall not eat anything that is produced by the grapevine, from the seeds, even from the skin. Through 5?
Okay. Say that again?
Can we go through 5?
Yes, please.
All the days of his vow of separation, no razor shall pass over his head. He shall be holy unto the days are fulfilled, for which he has separated himself to the Lord. He shall let the locks of his hair on his head grow long.
Okay, what is a Nazarite?
Someone who made this vow.
Okay, somebody who made this vow. Why would you do that?
You are separating yourself to the Lord. You're sanctifying yourself to the Lord.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're starting to see a group of people who have made a decision, a conscious decision, to separate themselves out. Their intent, they've got to go through these rituals. Give me an example, a biblical example, somebody who was a Nazarite.
Samson.
Yep.
Samuel.
Okay. Samson. Was Samson a Nazarite? Do you remember what brought him down?
Cut his hair.
Cut his hair.
Or that woman.
Okay, so again, keep in your mind as you're thinking about the books of Leviticus, the books of Numbers, that what we are doing is we're laying forth a foundation of what these people are to follow. And furthermore, we're trying to get them to be a clean people presentable to God. And now we brought in this new group of people, the Nazarites. Somebody go ahead and pick up starting in verse 6 and read through, say, verse 12.
Sorry, what verse, Brad? Verse 6
6 through 12.
of chapter 6.
Yes.
All the days of his separation to the Lord, he shall not go near to a dead person. He shall not make himself, unclean for his father, or for his mother, for his brother, or for his sister, when they die, because his separation to God is on his head. All the days of his separation is holy to the Lord. But if a man dies very suddenly beside him, and he defiles his dedicated head of hair, then he shall shave his head on the day when he becomes clean. He shall shave it on the 7th day. Then on the 8th day he shall bring 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons to the priest to the doorway of the tent of meeting. The priest shall offer one for a sin offering and the other for a burnt offering, and make atonement for him concerning his sin because of the dead person. And that same day he shall consecrate his head, and shall dedicate to the Lord his days as a Nazarite, and shall bring a male lamb, a year old, for a guilt offering. But the former days will be void, because the separation was defiled.
Okay. I want you guys to be thinking about this group of people. We're reading all of these things they had to do. They couldn't mess with vinegar. They couldn't abstain from grapes and raisins. They couldn't cut their hair. as you look at the prescription to be a Nazarite, you recognize a parent, man or woman, could be Nazarite, or you could prescribe your male child to be a Nazarite. You could go ahead and say, I'm going to raise my child a Nazarite. What is a modern day example? If I were to ask you, give me a group of people who have kind of perverted this and twisted it and are basically doing something similar today.
Mennonites.
Okay? Mennonites. Let's think about that for just a moment. Why would you say Mennonites?
I don't think they cut their hair.
Okay. But, wait a second. Before I let you off the hook, do not all Mennonites follow the same code? This is a special group within the group. Give me another example. There's two people, and if I were to mention the specific religion, you guys would get them instantly, that stand out as kind of like this. Yeah.
Nuns and stuff in the Catholics.
There you go. How about nuns and priests? Priests are supposed to abstain from sexual activity. They are supposed to set themselves aside. Nuns obviously are big time set aside, dressing different, acting different. They give up their financial wealth, take a vow of poverty. How would you argue against somebody that says, we've got an Old Testament example of Nazarites being holy to God. These were people who took it upon themselves to be closer to God, to be clean. So what's wrong with a nun?
I'd take them to 1 Timothy chapter 4, first 3 verses.
Okay, read that for us.
But the Spirit explicitly says that in later times some will fall away from the faith, paying attention to deceitful spirits and doctrines of demons, by means of the hypocrisy of liars, seared in their own consciences as with a branding iron. Men who forbid marriage and advocate abstaining from foods which God has created to be gratefully shared in by those who believe and know the truth. I don't think that he's definitely directly prophesying the Catholic religion there, but that's definitely something that they do.
Okay.
And,
that's a good point.
You go to the whole thing about we're under the new covenant now, not the old covenant.
That is a great way to frame the argument, to set it up like that. What else? Keely?
It's kind of different because a nun taking her vows, isn't it kind of a lifetime thing? Whereas it seems like with the Nazarites, it's a finite time until their days of separation are over.
Okay. So you could actually hone in on some of the specifics. You could say, look, wait a second, nuns still eat raisins. Nuns cut their hair. Most of the lady nuns, they shave their mustaches. Just kidding. But if I'm in a nun position, I would come right back to you and say, but you're missing the point. The Nazarites here were setting themselves apart as a holy people to God, and that's what we do. Somebody else? Yeah.
Well, we're all part of a royal priesthood, according to 1 Peter 2:9.
Okay. What's that have to do with anything?
Well, we're all sanctified at this point. There's no distinction between of groups.
Okay. Very good. You take your argument and you mix that with the 1 Timothy argument, and you got a solid answer. Put those two together, and it's right on the money. All right. Chapter 7. Any questions through chapter 6, all the way through the end of chapter 6? All right, chapter 7, we talk about offerings of the leaders. Now it came to pass, when Moses had finished setting up the tabernacle, that he anointed it, consecrated it, all of its furnishings, the altar, its utensils, so that he anointed them and consecrated them. Then the leaders of Israel, the heads of the fathers' houses, who were the leaders of the tribes, over all those who were numbered, made an offering. They brought their offering before the Lord, 6 covered carts, 12 oxen, a cart for every 2 of the leaders, for each one an ox. They presented them before the tabernacle. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, accept these from them, that they may be used in doing the work of the tabernacle of meeting, that you shall give them to the Levites, to every man according to his service. So Moses took the carts, the oxen, gave them to the Levites. Okay, give me a New Testament example of what's going on right here. What verse does that kind of bring to mind? Acts chapter 2. Acts chapter 2, the people sold all they had to do what?
Part them to every man who had need.
To give to those who had need. So we've got the people out around the Levites who own things, who have things. God is basically, as much as this pains me to say this, He's redistributing the wealth. I don't say that to say that that is politically correct in America, simply that that was politically correct for the Levites. He is getting those who have something to this special clan of people who are going to need it. Why do they need oxen? Come on now, what's Uzzah?
Because they're going to
Why would they need oxen?
stuff all around.
To move the stuff. There you go. All right. Flip on over to, again, realize all of this, all of chapter 7 is focusing on offerings. And I'm not going to go through that in detail. You guys are certainly welcome to read through exactly what God was wanting each one of them to do. But I want us to get to some more of the meat. Chapter 8, the arrangement of the lamps, the cleansing, the dedication of the Levites. Look with me at chapter 9. Chapter 9, we've got what is considered to be the second Passover. The Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the first month, the second year after they had come out of the land of Egypt, saying, let the children of Israel keep the Passover at its appointed time. On the 14th day of this month, at twilight, you shall keep its appointed time. According to all of its rites and ceremonies, you shall keep it. So Moses told the children of Israel that they should keep the Passover. They kept the Passover on the 14th day of the first month, in the twilight, in the wilderness of Sinai, according to all the Lord had commanded Moses, so the children of Israel did. Now there were certain men who were defiled by a human corpse, so that they could not keep the Passover on that day. And they came before Moses and Aaron that day. And those men said to him, we became defiled by a human corpse. Why are we kept from presenting the offering to the Lord at its appointing time among the children of Israel? And Moses said to them, stand still, that I may hear what the Lord will command concerning you. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel, saying, if any one of you or your posterity is unclean because of a corpse or far away on a journey, he may still keep the Lord's Passover. On the 14th day of the second month at twilight, they may keep it. They shall eat it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. They shall leave none of it until morning, nor break one of its bones. According to all the ordinance of the Passover, they shall keep it. What do you take away from this part of the passage right here?
It had to be done no matter what. The Passover.
Had to be done no matter what. What else?
Evening service.
You're closer on than you might believe. Was he saying you had to physically be there in order to pay homage to God? Come on, guys.
He said they
Think about what he said.
He said they could be traveling and they would still do it.
They can be traveling and still do it. So what does that mean if I say, let's say today at 5 o'clock, me and my family, we're loading up and we're going to Florida. Which, by the way, we are loading up and going to Florida. What does that mean if I'm not on vacation, it's work, but what does that mean?
You can still
Do I get to skip out of everything just because I'm out of town? No? God is basically trying to lay forth the idea to these people that I don't care where you are. In fact, he kind of even indicates, I don't care what state you're in, i.e. if you're unclean outside the camp or if you're a stranger in a foreign land, I expect you to observe this particular feast, this Passover.
I got a question.
Yeah.
But
Sure.
he doesn't want them to do it while they're traveling or while they're unclean. He wants them to do it later.
Yes, we got to keep on reading. 14th day of the second month at twilight, they may keep it. They shall eat it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. Notice verse 12 and following. They shall leave none of it until morning, nor break one of its bones. According to all the ordinance of the Passover, they shall keep it. But the man who is clean and is not on a journey ceases to keep the Passover, that same person shall be cut off from among his people. If a stranger dwells among you and would keep the Lord's Passover, he must do so according to the rite of the Passover and according to the ceremony. And you shall have one ordinance both for the stranger and the native of the land. So if you got a stranger in town, he may do it. Now, let me get back to you for just a second. What you were saying, they couldn't do it?
Right, because the Passover takes place in 9 verse 3. The Passover takes place in the first month on the 14th day of the month. But for the people that were defiled, he says, you're going to do this in the second month. You're going to do this later, not during the time that you're traveling, not during the time that you're defiled. It makes provision for them to do it later in the year.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Okay. But were they let off the hook? No. Any other comments or thoughts on this? Again, guys, what I'm hoping you're starting to see is you can pull passages just like this, and you can teach people modern day application to our modern worship system and still paint for them a full portrait of who God is, what he expects. Obviously, you're going to have somebody out there going, wow, we live under the New Testament. And I am so glad, thanks be to God, that we do, because I wouldn't physically be able to keep up with all this stuff. I'd have to have a BlackBerry that had all these laws plugged into it with timers and bells and beepers and everything, letting me know when I could do what I could do and when and how. And Thankfully, we're under the New Testament, but I remind you, that doesn't change who God is, does it? And ultimately, it doesn't change what he expects from people who, out of their own free will, seek to serve him. Now, if he expected these people to be obedient to him and to pay homage to him, and he expected them to always observe the Passover, what do you think about us missing the Lord's Supper nowadays? A memorial feast. Which one was more important, this Passover or the Lord's Supper?
Supper.
Absolutely. Guys, we're talking about remembering the death of his son. So can you draw from the Old Testament, teach and preach to folks? Absolutely. Starting in verse 15, we start talking about the cloud moving. On that day, the tabernacle was raised up. The cloud covered the tabernacle, the tent of testimony, from evening until morning. It was above the tabernacle like appearance of fire. So it was always. The cloud covered it by day, the appearance of fire by night. Whenever the cloud was taken up from the children from above the tabernacle, after that the children of Israel would journey. In the place where the cloud settled, there the children of Israel would pitch their tents. Great example of God leading people exactly where they need to be. Chapter 10, the Lord spoke to Moses saying,
Sorry, before you get onto another subject, and just I was curious, when we first started, we talked about the different tribes. There's 13 tribes, and I guess I'd heard that before. Maybe there was an explanation. And I noticed that Joseph is divided into two tribes.
Manasseh and Ephraim.
Is there a reason given for that? Or is that just what he tells them?
Go all the way back to Genesis 49 real quick.
I'm sorry about that, but it's something that's just.
No. That's the reason why y'all are in a class, so you can have questions answered. Genesis 49, Jacob giving his last words. Nope, that's not where it is. I'm looking for, there's a passage where...
48:17.
Because Joseph's son, his two sons, and they divided.
Do we have a reason?
It starts in 11. If you're talking about where he blesses the two.
There we go. Yeah, chapter 48. Thank you, whoever. Joseph took them both, Ephraim with his right hand toward Israel's left hand, Manasseh with his left hand toward Israel's right hand, brought them near to him. That's basically when it starts right there. That's where Joseph's children were split into two additional ones. In fact, if you go back, turn Chris to Genesis chapter, look at 41. Chapter 41, starting in verse 51. This is where he's having his children. Actually, verse 50, to Joseph were born two sons before the years of the famine came. Verse 51, Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, for God has made me forget all of my toil in my father's house. Ephraim, for God has caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. So, these two people, that's Joseph's lineage is going to be split among Ephraim and Manasseh from that point on. And we've got Jacob basically laying his blessing on their lineage.
I take it then the purpose maybe that because of Joseph's continued obedience, maybe his descendants were blessed with a little bit more in the land of Canaan. But it also offers an opportunity for the tribe of Levi to be the priestly nation.
Yes.
Okay.
You mean to have you mean to kind of round out that 12 number?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got to keep the 12 tribes, obviously,
Right.
and then the 13th one, since they weren't going to inherit any land, you had to have 13. I guess. It somewhat answers my question. Maybe maybe something I can do on my own and look into it.
Well, do you guys have a map of the tribes?
Yeah.
Okay. If you look on where the 12 tribes landed, where they initially set up, you notice Manasseh and Ephraim are right together.
Yeah.
They're both on the coast. And you can look at that one of two ways. You can say, okay, there's 12 places, there's 12 areas here. Or you can look at it and say, okay, you've got 11 sons and the Levites that were split up in this particular area. But when you ask any of the scholars and you say, okay, when they went into the Promised Land, what happened? The common response is you got 12 tribes that were split over the land of milk and honey. Technically, you do have 12 tribes because the Levites were spread all over the area, but those 12 individual spots were broken between Joseph's two boys, Manasseh and Ephraim. And if you look on the map, they got a pretty good chunk. Why? I don't know that I can necessarily, other than saying, Joseph was the one who physically carried them through the famine. I don't know that I could give you another reason. JT, can you offer anything on that?
I don't know anything.
Okay. Tell you what, you do a write-up, give me a 12-page paper on it, and that'll be good. All right, back to, you guys just trying to keep me out of the Bible. Back to Numbers. Numbers chapter 10, Lord spoke to Moses, saying, make 2 silver trumpets for yourself. You shall make them of hammered work. You shall use them for calling the congregation, for directing the movement of the camps. So, right here, Numbers chapter 10, we've got the very first cell phone texting issue going on. God says, hey, we got to have a way to communicate with the people. Make yourself 2 trumpets. Megaphones, whatever you want to call them. And that's how they're going to know we got to get up and move, or we got to meet, or whatever. Again, think with me for just a moment. If the Bible was just a plain Jane book, do you think it would have some of this kind of stuff in it? I mean, this to me is proving more and more inspiration, because he's going into detail about things that most people wouldn't even think about. He's talking about how do you communicate with a group that big. When you got 2 million people, you got to have a way to communicate with these people. So through inspiration, he tells us how he was able to communicate with them. Chapter 11. Now, after all of this, God sets out all of his parameters. He says, here's how we're going to move. Here's your camps. Here's what direction your camp is going to be on. Okay, Levites, here's your specific jobs. Here's the law. Here's the punishments for you breaking the law. What do the people do?
Break the law.
They complain. Chapter 11. And when the people complained, it displeased the Lord. For the Lord heard it. His anger was aroused. So the fire of the Lord burned among them, and it consumed some of the outskirts of the camp. And imagine that picture for just a moment. You sitting there praying that your tent ain't on the outside of the camp. Thinking, oh great, the Lord's fixing to... It's kind of like the California wildfires. You want to be in a totally different place rather than on the edge of where it's smoldering. People cried out to Moses. Moses prayed to the Lord, and the fire was quenched. Again, if I'm a skeptic, I'm looking you in the eye and I'm saying that's lightning. That was caused by lightning. That was not a biblical event. And it was quenched by rain. How you come back to me? First off, do we have any text that would indicate it was lightning? No. Second off, who causes lightning?
God.
There you go. So you're covered either way.
It also seems that it... Never mind.
No, go ahead.
I would say it seemed, when it says consume some of the outskirts of the camp, it seems like it might have been more of a widespread event rather than just a lightning struck and caught somebody's tent on fire.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah,
Although if I was going against you, I'd say I'd hit a tree and spread. But yeah, question, comment.
If it says some of the outskirts of the camp. If lightning strikes on the west side and you got fire on the east side, because it's all the outskirts, that wouldn't. It'd have to strike. It just happened to strike on all the outside of the camp.
Right. If you got A on this finger, B on this finger, lightning strikes on A. The quickest route to B is straight through the middle of the camp, not around the camp. So there had to be some kind of a divine intervention, providence, miracle, whatever you want to call it, to keep it on the outskirts of the camp. Why would I make a big deal at all to you guys about these people complaining?
Because people complain today all the time.
All the time.
Okay? Obviously, people complain today. People aren't content today. But why this people in particular is it a big deal? Yeah, in the back.
Seems like the Israelites did that quite a lot throughout the Old Testament.
Okay?
And particularly after God has shown himself strong in their life, and then for them to turn around and complain.
Exactly. After God has given them so many blessings, they've seen it firsthand, they still gripe. Now, I don't know each one of you as well as I want to yet. Hopefully I'll get to know you through the months. I don't know what kind of personalities each one of you have. I can kind of tell on a few of you. But when you think about how you come across to other people, do you come across as a negative person who complains? Or are you very positive and upbeat? And why would I demand that Christians should be positive and upbeat?
Because we have a lot to be thankful for and positive about.
Exactly. I don't know about you guys, but I'm washing the blood. And I know where I'm going. And I'm excited to get there. Can't wait to get there. Tell my wife all the time, if my plane goes down, honey, you know that I'm going down with a smile on because I'm going home and I don't have to work. I get to rest and sing. So, when I see Christians who have a negative countenance upon them, it kind of grates against my skin. Because I'm thinking, man. And it reminds me of these Old Testament people who got to see the miracles of God. They walk through on dry land. They have manna to eat. They're fixing to eat quail. And yet they're still complaining.
Yeah, I mean, they complain in verse 4 about who will give us meat to eat. And it's just talked about how they're a rabble filled with greedy desires. So
always wanting something more. What does Paul tell us that I think is one of the verses that we as preachers need to remind ourselves on a daily basis?
Be content.
Yeah. Somebody quote that for me.
Learn to be content in all situations. I can't quote it word for word, but whether I'm hungry, whether I'm full, whether I'm,
In all things.
whether I'm rich or poor.
There you go. Okay. Guys, you know, every single one of you in there is going to find yourself in a different situation in 5 years. One of the things that will bring you so much peace and solace is if you can find contentment in whatever situation you find yourself in. Some of you in there are probably struggling financially right now. I've been there. I got the T-shirt. I went to school thinking I was going to be a neurosurgeon. We took out over $100,000 in loans thinking, no big deal. I'll pay it off in 3 years. I'll be making a neurosurgeon salary. I know what it feels like. But I also know that there's a big difference if you approach life content in whatever state you're in versus grumbling and griping. There'll be a few of you in that room that within 3 years, you're going to be in a perfect setting. You got great elders, and you're going to be loving life. And there'll be one or two of you in there that's absolutely being tried like you've never believed. But the question is, how are you going to approach that situation, whether it's great or horrible? Are you going to look at it and say, I'm doing the Lord's work, I'm content? Or are you going to focus all of your attention on what you don't have, the negatives, or what somebody else does have? It'd be very easy for you to kind of look around your classmates and go, man, Lyle got that lush job up in Lake Tahoe, Congregation 200, getting paid a lot of money. And here I am, Chris, back in Arkansas. Nobody in my congregation has on any shoes.
I'll trade, Chris.
Oh, that was true.
All right, let's pick up in verse 4. Now the mixed multitude who were among them yielded to intense craving. So the children of Israel also wept against it. Who will give us some meat to eat? For you remember the fish which we ate freely in Egypt, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. Now, a couple of things on this.
Great job.
Speaking of melons, cucumbers, leeks, and meat, y'all go fill yourselves up.
I want to eat meat so it comes out of my nose.
By the way, guys,